Let's talk some Raider trash. Because Raiders are trash. And why are the Raiders trash? I would say it mostly stems from the Raiders organization itself and who they try to cultivate as fans wherever they go. They left Oakland twice, and each time they want to cultivate the same type of fans, basically, especially the ones they picked up in LA, where at the time you had an explosion of cocaine into the United States, and then it subsequently became a crack epidemic, and California was certainly affected by it. And you have all this gang nonsense. You have people promoting romper room rap music, which is the soundtrack to crime. And this is how the Raiders got this reputation, especially. Yes, there were some unsavory type of things that lingered around Oakland in its days in the 60s and 70s with just the social counterculture type of thing that was going on at the time. But it was way different than what happened in the 1980s, what developed. They went from, just maybe like protest to mass homicides. And that is, look at the owner. He invites romper room rap artists to sit right beside him, some of which had connections to gangs. And because of this, Raider fans tend to be extremely dumb. And people who cover the Raiders oftentimes fall into that category. And the people who cover the Raiders are homers for this and never criticize this. The Raiders left Oakland for the second time, but they didn't change anything in the process. And look at their home games. Their home games are other people's games. They don't have a home. Allegiant Stadium is not their home. And look what they're doing right now. They just fired their offensive coordinator finally after tanking the entire season, which was by design. Going back to last year, they hired this completely unknown coach as an interim coach. And okay, that is fine to finish out a season. But afterwards, you do not listen to the inmates. You do not listen to the freaks in the crazies in the asylum who tell you to hire this guy full time. He's only given a 2-year contract, which supposedly resulted in the Raiders having a limited offensive coordinator selection. There's probably something else to that as well, because the Raiders didn't go and try to draft anyone. They decided to sign a so-called bridge quarterback and try to see what would happen with Aiden O'Connell. Now, it's pretty obvious where they wanted to go. They wanted to sign Cliff Kingsbury, and they wanted to draft the undersized, toothpick Jaden Daniels. He was just another hit away from just being carted off the field and put in a body bag, really. And the only reason someone like that has any sort of success is just how the league has been watered down. I mean, just look at all the crybabies out there crying because Derek Carr overthrew a pass, and Chris Olave, who's a regular bish, just like Davante Adams, got carted off the field. He has a history of getting carted off the field. Because these guys, when did we stop making wide receivers these huge stars? I know it goes back even into the 70s, but really, when you stop making these players who are benefiting by these stupid rules they're not going to protect you. It's kind of like jaywalking rules. Yes, it's illegal. It's illegal to jaywalk. And it's illegal to hit someone, a pedestrian rather, in the crosswalk or something. But that doesn't mean you can't get hit. It is extremely dangerous to go over the middle, and the Raiders made a reputation of stopping people going over the middle back in the 70s when the rules were different. But the Raiders obviously wanted one of these quarterbacks, and that was the one they wanted. And they thought they might want another one, but he was the one they wanted. And because of that, they went to Plan B, and Plan B was always to tank this season. I'm telling you right now, don't listen to people that cover the Raiders that are connected with The Athletic, the Sports Illustrated, ESPN, any of these talk shows on YouTube. They're full of shit. They are lying to you. It's pretty obvious what they're doing. It's pretty obvious what they did in reaction to firing Getsy, who everyone knew was no good. And who did they replace him with? They replaced him with Norv Turner's son. I think his name's Chris Turner. Check that. Promotes Scott Turner. Okay, Scott Turner. He's got another son. I don't know if back in 2004 when he coached the Raiders, if there was someone else on the staff called Turner, Chris Turner. That's what I was thinking of. I don't know if he's related. It did not say that. But this was a pretty bad year for the Raiders. If you go back to 2004, the last time Norv Turner coached the Raiders, he's just an associate now. Just an advisor, a consultant, so to speak, which tells me a lot about what Mark Davis is thinking of. Not only Antonio Pierce, but also the other guy, Marvin Lewis. I don't think I think both of them, they're both going to get fired without question. But he brings in Norv Turner, he was brought in. And at the time, Rich Gannon was still on the roster, and he got injured. And Kerry Collins was the quarterback for that year. Kerry Collins, Marquise Tuasopo, I can't even pronounce it anymore. But those were the quarterbacks for the Raiders. The Raiders actually don't have any quarterback like Kerry Collins. Like someone with an arm like that. That's what Al Davis used to do. Just trade and sign players, quarterbacks with huge arms. And he was one of them, one of the biggest ones. The Raiders had some pretty good players on this team. Nnamdi Asomugha. I can't even pronounce his name. The Raiders started having these players where you can't pronounce their names anymore. This particular year, they had a very bad draft. This is still the era where Al Davis is making all the decisions, though. They had a very bad draft with Robert Gallery, selected number 1, the second pick. Jake Grove, he didn't pan out either. The free safety, Stuart Schweigert, I don't remember him panning out. And many others that didn't pan out. And this went on forever. with the Raiders. You know, culminating in the worst ever with Jamarcus Russell several years later. But Norv Turner's been brought in. The Raiders weren't particularly impressive this particular year offensively or winning games. And to me, that's by design. They just want someone who can lose a lot of games so they can supposedly draft one of these top players. Now I'm going to go into our website. I'm just using it as a reference. I don't know their rankings here. If everyone agrees, like any, I'm talking about like scouts, people who look at these plays much more closely than people who play Madden. There's a lot of people playing Madden right now, and they're playing Madden with critiques of Derek Carr, how he's got Dennis Allen fired twice. Just Derek Carr alone. No one else. They make these stupid arguments. Granted, they're kids, and there's just this human element when humans are extremely insecure and they pick someone else out of the village or whatever you want to call it, and they point the finger at that one person, you know, to deflect away from themselves. It's very common in society, and Derek Carr is the scapegoat for just about everything going on with football. There's no critiques of Davante Adams, really. He can go on Kay Adams all the time, and she will give him the softest interview, even though I think they will be screwing very soon, if they haven't already. But let's go to these draft things. See, the Raiders fans, it's not tanking for Tua. Do you remember when the Dolphins tanked? Seem to be tanking. Well, they won some games in the end, and they wound up with Tua anyway. But there was other options. They could have went with Herbert, but the Raiders want Shedeur Sanders. First of all, the main rule in life is to avoid anything French. And this is classic. Shedeur. I can't tell you how irritating it is to live in a city where Al Davis was born that is full of illegal aliens, although they seem to have cleared out of town because Trump won the election and they are going to be sent back home. This time it's going to be executive order. This time the Supreme Court is not going to stand in the way of the end of temporary protection status for the earthquake that happened like a decade ago. And all they do is walk down the street, Bluetoothing it, or wherever they are, in a store or something, and they're just blah, 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 and away in French. No, that is one red flag right there. His name, Shedeur. That is gay. And he's 6'2". It's too short. Too short. And 4.65, 40? He doesn't sound like his father was chasing him around much. His father was catching him. His father probably still runs faster than him. He's too slow. He's too slow for a so-called mobile quarterback. But the Raiders fans, they're tanking for Sanders. Colonel Sanders, get that? He plays for Colorado. His father sells fried chicken for the Colonel. Kentucky Fried Chicken. The Colonel Sanders. Colorado Sanders. Colonel Sanders. No, that is ghetto. What are they gonna get a running back called Watermelon? I mean, this is ghetto. This is plantation shit right now. Get off the plantation. This is not who you select in this draft. These players are not going to be ranked by real scouts this high. And this includes Sanders. This includes the other quarterback, Cam Ward, who's a similar size, and 4.87 40. That's sounding like Jamarcus Russell. He's just going to stand there like a statue, and in a Raider system, he's going to fail. These guys are hyped up by the media. That's it. There are other players on this board, including Shador's teammate, Travis Hunter, who is the top-ranked cornerback, according to this. Trying to see if it's sorted. Doesn't sort. I was looking for another cornerback in the list 12 per page. There's another cornerback, Denzel Burke. There's no one coming off the page as far as cornerbacks with elite speed. I mean, ridiculous speed, I'm saying. There are some safeties that, there's one right here, 4.35 speed. And trust me, speed matters. But back to the top list. Going back when the Raiders did their reset in after 1997, because 1997 was very much like this year. The year before, the Raiders were bad, and the players lobbied Al Davis to hire Joe Bugel. Now, most Raider fans don't know this because they're stupid, they're young, they're stupid, and they're stupid. They have no perspective of what has happened before. When you hire someone based on the player's recommendations, you set yourself up for failure, because there has to be some sort of order, and back then there was none. If you look at the 2004, even the 2004 Raiders, Al Davis was still picking the staff. He picked everything. He picked his nose. He picked other people's noses. He did everything with his overhead projector, his red telephone, you name it. That's it. That's what the Raiders were back then. And they were dysfunctional then, and Mark Davis is trying to do the same thing, and he did, because it was very predictable. It was predictable back then, I guess. I remember it. The players that year in 1997 threw Joe Bugel under the bus several times. There were heated sideline exchanges, and I expect that to happen sooner or later with Antonio Pierce. Someone on the Raiders, it might not be some pushover. It might not be someone that wants to be friends with everybody like Max Crosby, but it could be someone else on the Raiders that's just sick of it. Just sick of, the head coach doesn't take any responsibility. I would say with Bugel, it was probably because Al Davis was undermining them. I mean, the players knew that they could go to the owner, and that's what they go to right now. Because Lombardi was the one that was bringing that up the other day, which I understand this because I know when the Raiders last were great or good, things were a little bit different. And Lombardi knows, because he was there, of how you have to set up the structure of a team, and you can't have the players crying to the owner and having that ability to force issues, force trades, force anything. And he's mocking them, for smoking cigars, and all the stupid Raider fans, and I mean stupid, romper room rap listening stupid Raider fans, all they can think of is because his son got fired and it's the Patriot way. Well, now you have a fucking schmuck as a co-owner in the Patriot way, and he's going to be the one ill-advising ill-advising the stupid bull-cut owner. And he will advise them to pick Shedeur Sanders. This is a stupid move, and it's going to get stupider when the next head coach of the Raiders is going to be really bad. And, you know, if the Raiders were trying to win right now, you know who they would sign as an offensive coordinator? Bo Hardegree. They would trade a first-round pick for him. He is, you name me, the top 5 Raider offensive coordinators that had a team that scored 60 points. I know the Chargers were having their problems or whatever, but I don't remember Raider teams scoring that many points, except Bo Hardegree. But anyway, when you're drafting, and we're going to go back to 1997, the Raiders lose very bad, and they have the number 4 overall pick, I believe. And ahead of them were 2 quarterbacks. They weren't going to trade up for them. Those teams were going to choose those quarterbacks because they were considered 1 and 2. Depends on which one you want. Did you want the system quarterback in Peyton Manning, or did you want the big rocket arm of Ryan Leaf? Well, we know what happened after that. Number 3, interestingly enough, was Joe Thomas, who the Cleveland Browns picked, and he became a Hall of Famer. And I think the Raiders probably have that with Jackson Spowers Johnson. I mean, he's the one you're going to pay. He's the one you're going to build your franchise around. You're not going to build it around Kuntz. A lot of Raider fans, Raider commentators want Kuntz to get this huge, huge contract. It's not how it works. He injured himself. And look at the other one they signed in the offseason. Defensive tackle. He gets injured. And it's debatable as how he got injured. I mean, some guy did climb on his back. They're trying to say that that's not how he got injured, but I would say it didn't help. And it's stupid. And it's stupid for the Raiders to be celebrating tackles. I mean, it is a sad state of affairs when you're celebrating tackles as a team. You go watch old Raider games when the Raiders were actually good every year. And you will not see them celebrating tackles like they do nowadays. That is retarded and needs to stop. But Bugle was fired, and the Raiders in the draft, they picked the cornerback, the top cornerback, Charles Woodson, and their team started to turn around. But the other thing they picked was Al Davis chose between John Gruden, an assistant with Philadelphia. He had been an assistant or quarterbacks coach with San Francisco. He chose him over Bill Belichick because he didn't want a disciplinarian. And that is the problem. But the Raiders got a disciplinarian. If you know anything about the Raiders, when the Raiders were good, they did not have this ghetto mentality. You know what they had? They had Rich Gannon. He came in there. He ripped out their fucking video games, stole their pool balls, and said, no, you get to work. You start watching film. He forced them to change, to be dedicated. And that's the problem with the Raiders. I mean, Jamarcus Russell, remember the thing with, I forget the linebacker telling the story? he gave him a blank CD-ROM or whatever and says, here's some new plays to look over. You look them over and see which ones you like. And he didn't even, he's like, yeah, they're all great. He didn't even watch it. And that is what Raider fans want with this Shedeur Sanders mentality. In this draft, the Raiders have many problems. Many problems. They have problems at cornerback. Oh, Jack Jones, he had a pick six. Oh, really? What was he doing on the other plays? His pick six was taking a wild chance. But on the other plays, he was getting beat left and right. The Raiders were not getting after the quarterback. So the Raiders have a defensive line problem. They might have a defensive coach problem. I don't know where people think that Patrick Graham is so good. They're just going by the Raiders aren't giving up a lot of points. Well, the other team doesn't have to score a lot of points versus the Raiders. The Raiders fucking suck. Wake the fuck up. So, the Raiders have a extremely bad roster. They have some skill positions, but they don't have any base. They might need to replace their left tackle and right tackle. That is monumental. Yes, they drafted someone, but he's looking like a backup. And Kolton Miller looks like he's regressed. Maybe it's because they don't have a quarterback that threatens anything. But guess what? You do not select these overinflated quarterbacks in the draft so high like they did last year. You select best player available. The Raiders in 1998, they could have selected some of the other quarterbacks. There were some other quarterbacks. I forget who was there. I think Brian Griese. They could have got him. There was a couple other ones. I forget one of them. One of them was picked in the 3rd round. Let me look that up. I'm sure there were other quarterbacks. They might not have been as ranked so high. I do believe this will sort it. Let's see. They couldn't get Manning or Leaf, but they could have got Charlie Batch. Are you kidding me? Why didn't they draft Charlie Batch? Can you imagine nowadays? Because the internet was very young back then. I mean, the internet, when Gruden was hired, I remember I was on it wasn't GeoCities, I think. It was another place where you made your own website using HTML. And it was one of the Raider fan message boards I was on, and that's where someone coined the phrase. I don't know if they got it off of talk radio, but they called it they called him Chucky. That's the first time I ever seen it on one of those boards. It was just on a simple message board, and they called him Chucky. So one person said Chucky, and it stuck. Yeah. But can you imagine nowadays, the people from back then, if they had the internet of today, where people are overinflating these players coming out? Yeah, Charlie Batch. Yeah, the Raiders should go for Charlie Batch. Charlie Batch is the 3rd ranked quarterback, and we're expecting him to go maybe with the 3rd or 4th pick. They would have picked him over Charles Woodson, and they would have had a lot of problems with Charlie Batch. Instead, they got a foundational piece in Charles Woodson, and that's who you pick. Yeah, there was Brian Griese, Jonathan Quinn, Matt Hasselbeck was there. Come on, he's on TV, isn't he? I mean, that's how you pick, right? Go by who's on TV. But I can see right in this draft, you got cornerbacks ranked very high. You got offensive tackles. You're always going to have defensive tackles, I guarantee, right below that. You have too many of these wide receivers, way too high. You have defensive tackles. And you could have held out more on Devontae Adams and possibly got a second round pick. But you didn't. You're going to get like a third round pick. But if you select a quarterback before you have everything else in place, that quarterback is going to fail. The Raiders have nothing in place. They have an extremely bad offensive line right now. And the brightest spot right now is Jackson Powers-Johnson, without question. And people are talking about him. He is probably the second or third best player on the Raiders. Without question. Without fucking question. Max Crosby is up there as far as like all the superlatives of a, best player. But even he has limitations. Bowers has limitations because he has no one who's throwing him the ball. He should have at least 15 touchdowns right now. I'm not kidding. And if you're going to succeed in this salary cap era, you are going to have to build a foundation first. And the Raiders are failing at that or have more work to do. You need to get a better offensive line in place. You need a better defensive line in place. And the Raiders are not just a quarterback away. They really desperately need a cornerback, top quarterback, and the offensive line, of course. And then quarterback. And where would you pick a quarterback? Well, you can pick a quarterback several different ways. There are problems with some of the ways. But in the draft, I think it would be wisest to wait to the second or third round for someone like Juala. Not Allah. Not Juala. Juala. He is he appears to be a raw version of the love child between Patrick Mahomes and Allen with Buffalo. He's got the big arm of Allen. He moves around a bit like Mahomes. He does the weird passes like Mahomes. He is going to rise up in the ranks, though. He could go into the first round. And there's another option right there where you trade down. Raiders are going to have a lot of money in the free agency, too. I don't know who they could possibly sign as far as like offensive line and defensive line. But I think you have to consider that a different type of quarterback. He might be the best quarterback in this draft once he's developed. He could take years to develop. He is raw. But there are some other things. The Raiders are probably going to have to sign a quarterback. They will get rid of Minshew. They couldn't trade for Derek Carr right now, if people are wondering that. I mean, Derek Carr's he is restructured several times, and while there is an out after 2025, he his sign-in bonus or whatever it is would become immediately would be activated immediately upon trade-in, and the New Orleans Saints have huge salary cap problems right now. I think they're like $3 million or something under the cap right now, and it would be like $50 million right on the cap. It's just not going to be allowed. I don't know if people can be traded and restructured in some sort of way. I imagine if there's a will, there's a way, but there probably isn't a will. Because the Raiders, they have a new consultant in Tom Brady. Tom Brady, who benefited by referees and rule changes more than anyone. In fact, invented rules. Rules that were out of nowhere that no one even remember, know of. A fumble became a tuck rule. The what do you call it? The referees allowed the Patriots offensive line to hold the whole time. They could do whatever they wanted. It was after 9/11, so it was like, oh, patriotism, fake patriotism. And that is what they were doing with that team. Tom Brady is the most overrated quarterback. He would not live in the 80s. He would not survive in the 70s. He'd be put in a body bag. He wouldn't have lasted that long. And you're going to use him because he said like Derek Carr, he's the worst quarterback. You went with him when John Gruden went with Derek Carr over getting Tom Brady. So I don't think that's going to happen. And Mark Davis is stupid. He listens to stupid consultants, and he obviously got rid of Derek Carr, and he was Derek Carr is he owns all the Raiders' passing records. It's not just because he played in an era with more games. When you look at it, the Raiders' history with passing, it was very, very chancy. It was, it took a lot of risks. Let's just throw a bomb. And they would run the ball a lot too, in those eras. But the quarterbacks didn't throw as much as now. But you're going to have that conflating because the Raiders are going to be looking for a quarterback. And I can see that happen. It's not going to happen this year, obviously. But Derek Carr is probably going to be cut after June 1st next year. That's a certainty. Of course, what will really prompt Mark Davis to fire Antonio Pierce? If they start winning games? Or is it if he doesn't win games? I mean, it's a catch-22 because Raider fans are just dropping off. They're sick of the team. They're sick of the product. They're selling the tickets, and they're disgusted. The Raiders went off and got Davante Adams. Guarantee a lot of people got Davante Adams, game jerseys and stuff like that, and Antonio Pierce screwed that whole thing up. For him, it was Josh what's his name? Whatever his name is, the last McDaniels screwing it up. But it starts at the top. It starts with you have an owner who shouldn't be there. That's one thing I would agree with Lombardi says they need someone else running the team. They can't have this BLM bullshit going on. The other day, at some stadium, they told someone they couldn't wear a MAGA hat or something. And Raider fans have been kicked out and banned because they complain about the team. That's unbelievable. But people, football players, they can nail and stuff like that. And Mark Davis changed his attitude on that. He needs to stop talking to these idiots. If he can't handle it, he needs to put someone else in place. And, you know, I was thinking the other day that maybe his mother, Carol, someone should buy her a DNA kit for Christmas or maybe even Thanksgiving. They usually have them on sale around the holidays. And maybe she'll find out that maybe there's another kid out there. Maybe Al had another kid. Maybe there's a rush with some of Al's hair. They could do the DNA and find out he had another kid. Not him. No, Mark needs to do the DNA. Maybe someone needs to do the DNA to find out if Al had other kids. Was Al a swinger? Did Al have another kid out there who come into the Raiders like what's his name? Rodney Dangerfield and Joe Pesci and Easy Money. We're just browsing. Yeah, Al had another kid. That'll be the new movie. Because until it changes at the top, until this stupid social justice media bullshit stops, where they're just allowing the stupid criminals to rule the locker room, rule the way. You know, you should be most concerned if you're the owner of a team and, you know, these players, they have problems. You just look at them with the tattoos and stuff. The Brandons, and that's mental illness. These people cannot be the ones allowed to run the team. You can't have Davante Adams saying stuff on Kay Adams like, yeah, I appreciate like how they ran things past me first before doing anything. No, you can't. How can you have that? This is why they lose. Like I said, Al Davis started it. He wanted a very liberal type of a head coach and that had very few rules, but that was different back then. They actually showed up, even if they got fucked up the night before. They showed up for the game and they beat the other team almost every time. The only problem they really had in the 70s was the referees. You can't have the inmates run the jail. You need some order. And I'm afraid a lot of players need to go on the Raiders. Because if they're already rot, then you've got to consider moving on from them. Discipline is everything, and they need to get extremely disciplined. The consultant Mark Davis needs is Rich Gannon. And real Raider fans will agree with me on that. Rich Gannon needs to be the one calling the bullshit. You can't have it. You can't have this bullshit way. And you can't build a team from the top down. You gotta have a foundation. And it starts with the draft. And they had a pretty good draft last year. And you have to build upon that because no one wants to come to the Raiders. And if you have to pay for these players so much money, it just hurts what you develop later. And you have to get rid of players, or you do something like what the New Orleans Saints did and just kick it down the road. Rob Peter to pay Paul. The Raiders did it too for years. But Stop listening to these Raider broadcasts on YouTube and stuff who want to do all the clickbait draft bullshit. Raiders need to get foundational. Period. That is it. That is the bottom line. Foundational and discipline.